Gaming Bolt presents 14 games that made the worst transition from 2D to 3D. When games began to make the transition to 3D, every series under the sun tried to hop on the bandwagon. But not everyone was as successful as others. Here are the 14 games that made the worst transition from 2D to 3D. Street Fighter X. Street Fighter may be the best example of a series that should solely exist in the second dimension. The intricate combos, precise spacing, and move inputs were all meant for opponents who are face-to-face. Street Fighter X tried to improve the gameplay by putting combatants in a 3D arena where they could strafe around their foe. The result was a game that spat in the face of everything that Street Fighter stood for. Some series should just stay in the second dimension for their own good. Prince of Persia 3D. Long before The Sands of Time stole our breath away, Prince of Persia 3D tried to open up the fabled Prince's adventures. The result was a hard-to-control, unmemorable adventure that was dwarfed by the games that came both before and after it. Mega Man X7. Some series should just stay 2D, and such is the way with Mega Man. The Blue Bomber is at his best when he is bounding up and down, shooting down enemies, and taking down robot masters. This magic formula is at the core of Mega Man, so when Mega Man X7 tried to shake things up, it didn't exactly pan out. C. The Contra Adventure. What comes to mind when you think of Contra? For us, it's hard as nails gameplay held together by fantastic controls and level design. The Contra Adventure was the antithesis of this. Moving the game to 3D got rid of a lot of the series' charm, along with the tough as nails gameplay and colorful scenery. Mortal Kombat 4. When 3D began to crop up in various games, every series wanted to try their hand at it, especially fighting games. Mortal Kombat's motley crew of violent degenerates also made the transition, to lackluster results. The precise combat of the first three titles was lost and replaced by clunky movement, hard-to-pull moves, and less than stunning visuals. Earthworm Jim 3D. The spacefaring worm was quite the character when he first made his debut. He smirked and hopped his way through various perils, making his way through beautiful landscapes. Earthworm Jim 3D is possibly one of the best examples on how to transition a series to 3D and take away what made the original so great. These warring invertebrates were a lot of fun to play with on a 2D plane. Blowing up your enemies and seeing the battlefield crumble apart never stopped delighting. But when Worms 3D came out, the winning formula had its first loss. What used to be a stylish strategy game turned into a less than stellar third-person shooter, replete with awkward controls. Alundra 2. The first Alundra was a decent action RPG. When the second game decided to go 3D, the entire thing sort of fell apart. Combat was clunky, moving was more difficult than it should have been, and the graphics were incredibly blocky and ugly, even for the time. Bubsy 3D. Bubsy wasn't very good in 2D, so when he made the jump to 3D, he didn't quite stick the landing. The jumping was imprecise and floaty, and the environments were rather ugly to look at. Overall, a failed attempt at moving a franchise into the third dimension. Castlevania 64. Castlevania still stands as one of the best series on the NES and SNES. The same cannot be said about Castlevania 64. It took the incredibly strong foundation laid by the first several games in the series and did away with it, opting instead for more open areas and very lackluster combat. It was difficult to control and just not very fun. Narc. Narc is very much a child of the 80s. The entire plot revolves around a group of badasses hunting down and murdering drug users. It was meant to illustrate how bad drugs are, but some of the messaging was lost in translation. The fun was also lost when Narc went 3D. The bland beat-em-up had no identity, cementing the series as a failure. 3D Tetris. Who thought this was a good idea? Tetris is hard enough on its own. Expanding the action to 3 dimensions just makes it so convoluted that it's almost impossible to play. Tetris is still a classic for good reason. The gameplay is fast, fluid, and easy to understand. 3D Tetris is quite the opposite. Golden Axe Beast Rider. Beat-em-ups just can't be translated into 3D. Golden Axe was a stylish action game that saw players take control of barbarians and other brutal warriors to slaughter everyone in front of them. On the other hand, Golden Axe Beast Rider was a mediocre action game starring a bikini-clad warrior woman. It was completely underwhelming, single-handedly destroying the franchise. Final Fight Streetwise. Final Fight is still one of the most classic beat-em-ups, but the simple yet satisfying combat is better suited to the second dimension. When the series moved to 3D with Final Fight Streetwise, it devolved into a hard-to-control, bland-looking 3D brawler that was lacking in the charisma and style of the original. We hope you've enjoyed this video, so please consider subscribing to our channel. We do original content, reviews, graphics comparison, and much more, and try to upload a video every day. Thank you very much for checking us out.